Zion Keaton stood in front of his science fair project. Built from scraps, powered by brilliance, while his white teachers smirked from across the gym. The judges ignored him. The crowd whispered fraud, but just as they were about to move on, a quiet voice broke the silence. "That boy just solved a problem I've studied for 20 years. Heads turned. The man? A Nobel Prize winner. And what he said next made the entire room gasp. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The air in room 2214 was dry with fluorescent fatigue. The kind that made everything feel slower. Dust danced in the light shafts breaking through the dirty windows, and the hum of the overhead lights filled the silences between Miss Mallory Crane's voice and the occasional student yawn. It was just another Tuesday at Dalton Creek Middle School, except for Zion Keaton. Zion sat in the third row, second seat from the left, where the metal desk leg squeaked every time he shifted. His notebook was filled, not with doodles or half-finished notes like the rest of the 7th grade class, but with formulas, theories, and diagrams. His mind was always somewhere far beyond the chalkboard. Today it had taken him to quantum thermodynamics, though he didn't know the name for it yet. Miss Crane wrote the question on the board with exaggerated flair, her cursive trailing like smoke. What happens to energy when it disappears? The expected answer was simple. Textbook. Energy doesn't disappear, it transforms. But Zion's hand shot up with the urgency of someone whose mind had caught fire. Miss Crane raised an eyebrow. Yes, Zion? Zion cleared his throat. I think energy doesn't just transform. I think it remembers. Like it goes back to its previous state, if the conditions allow it. Almost like it has a memory. Silence. Then laughter. Not just giggles, but full-bodied classroom cackles. Even kids who barely understood the question laughed because Miss Crane laughed first. Sharp and loud. The kind of laugh that says, "How dare you?" More than it says, "That's funny." "Oh, Zion," Miss Crane said, blinking like she was holding back more laughter. Energy doesn't have memory. That's not how science works. Let's stick to the basics, okay? Zion's face didn't flush like it used to. He didn't look down, didn't cry. Instead, his fingers tightened around his pencil. He wasn't embarrassed. He was furious. He knew where that thought had come from. A late-night page-turning session through his grandfather's dusty journals. His grandfather, Dr. Elias Keaton, once an aspiring physicist, had been forced to abandon his dreams after being denied tenure at a southern university in the night. His work had faded into the background, buried in boxes, until Zion found them. The idea of energy having reversibility under certain microstate conditions wasn't something Zion made up. It was something he'd read, mulled over, and connected with the laws of entropy he learned weeks ago. But none of that mattered in room 24. Not to a teacher who saw his skin before his mind. "You always think too much," muttered a classmate beside him. "Trying to sound smart doesn't make you smart." Zion said nothing. He stared ahead, his jaw locked. As the class moved on, Ms. Crane continued with the lesson, but her energy shifted. She walked with a lighter step, like she'd won something. Zion's hand didn't go up again that day. After school, Zion walked the mile back to his grandmother's house. His sneakers slapped against cracked sidewalks, while the distant sound of sirens echoed in the background. Autumn leaves crackled underfoot. Dayton was quiet in that familiar, ignored kind of way, just loud enough to make sure you didn't dream too big. Inside the small 2-bedroom home, the air smelled like cornbread and old books. His grandfather's journals were stacked neatly on the coffee table, annotated and underlined. Zion didn't turn on the TV. Instead, he sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and reread his notes. He wrote down what Ms. Crane had said. Then in bold letters underneath, he wrote, "But what if she's wrong?" His fingers hovered over his tablet. He searched for Nobel physicists studying energy memory. Names popped up, articles too dense for most 7th graders. But Zion devoured them like comic books. Then one name appeared again and again. Dr. Arthur Bell, the youngest American ever to win the Nobel in physics. The man who redefined energy behavior on a quantum level. Zion clicked on a link to Dr. Bell's MIT profile. Heart thudding. There was an email, probably run by assistants, maybe even bots. But it was there. He opened a new message. Typed. "Dear Dr. Bell, my name is Zion Keaton. I'm 12 and live in Dayton, Ohio. I'm not in high school or college, but I think I have a question you might not think is dumb. I think energy can remember. Like it can return to a past state if the system conditions match. Is that dumb? I don't need an answer if you're busy. But someone laughed at me today, and I need to know if it was for no reason. He hovered over the send button. His finger trembled, not from fear but from everything that finger represented. Hope, rebellion, proof. Click. The message disappeared into cyberspace. Outside, the wind picked up. Zion walked back to the living room and stared at his grandfather's photo on the mantel. A young Elias Keaton, in a lab coat, eyes sharp and proud. Zion whispered, "They laughed at you too, huh?" He pulled a blanket over his shoulders and settled into the couch. A storm rolled in quietly, tapping against the window panes. Upstairs, his tablet buzzed. Zion didn't hear it. The screen glowed. Rear theory. From the desk of Dr. Arthur Bell. That night, Zion quietly sent an email to a Nobel Prize-winning physicist. The night passed slowly, with the storm whispering against the windows like it knew something Zion didn't. Morning came, but the world didn't look different. Dayton's sky was still the same shade of worn-out gray, and the buses still coughed black smoke as they rumbled down cracked streets. Zion walked to school like always, hood up, backpack clutched, the weight of the world nestled between a math textbook and a lunch he probably wouldn't eat. What no one knew, not the students sneering at his thrift store shoes, or the teachers barely nodding at his presence, was that something had shifted, something had answered. Zion had woken up to a response. Not from a bot, not from a gatekeeping assistant, but from the inbox of Dr. Arthur Bell's lab team. The subject line was still burned into his mind. Your theory on energy reversibility. Worth exploring? The message had been short, professional, and so impossible it made Zion stare at the screen for 5 minutes before daring to blink. Zion, Dr. Bell found your idea compelling. He'd like to know more about the source and how you arrived at it. Are you available for a brief Zoom call this week? Let us know your schedule. Sarah Yoon, lab coordinator, Bell Research Group, MIT. He hadn't told anyone. Not his parents, not even his grandmother, not because he didn't want to, but because he wasn't ready for anyone to steal this moment. He needed it to stay his. Just a little longer. At school, it was as if the universe wanted to remind him how unwanted his mind was. Miss Crane barely acknowledged him during roll call. When he turned in his homework early, she glanced at it, then muttered something about taking shortcuts. In gym, a group of boys made spaceship noises when he walked past. They'd call him NASA like it was an insult. The worst part wasn't the names. It was the way no one expected anything good to come from him, unless it could be mocked. Zion had learned the choreography of invisibility. Keep quiet. Blend in. Don't sound too smart. Don't sound too black. And above all, don't challenge authority. But that email in his inbox felt like someone had reached through the fog of silence and said, "I see you." That night, in his dimly lit room, Zion combed through his grandfather's journals again. The pages were yellowed, the handwriting tight and furious. Diagrams spilled across the margins. Notebooks filled with theories that had never been published, only whispered into lab meetings and promptly dismissed. Elias Keaton had once been the brightest mind in his physics cohort. Zion's mother used to say that racism didn't end his career. It just kept changing shape until it fit into a system that could politely deny him a future. When Elias applied for tenure, his application was under review for 2 years until it vanished. His groundbreaking paper on entropy decay was lost in circulation. One of his theories showed up years later in a peer-reviewed article, with someone else's name on it. And now, Zion carried that legacy like armor. Not for revenge, but for proof. That brilliance existed where few expected it. That the mind of a janitor's grandson could shake the foundation of what the world believed about energy itself. The email had asked for sources. Zion compiled everything. Photos of his grandfather's notes, scanned equations, even his own diagrams. He added annotations, explained his thought process in the simplest terms he could manage, all while shaking with nervous electricity. The next day at school, he could barely focus. Miss Crane called on him during a discussion about kinetic energy. He responded with precision. Her eyes narrowed. "Interesting," she said flatly. "Did you copy that from somewhere again?" The word again hung in the air like smoke. The class giggled, some nervously, others with satisfaction. Zion didn't flinch. Not anymore. After lunch, he found a quiet corner in the library and opened his tablet. A new email had arrived. "Zion, thank you for the materials. Dr. Bell was particularly intrigued by the concept in Journal 4, page 12. He would like to speak with you directly. We can arrange a Zoom call this Thursday at 5 p.m. EST. Does that work for you? Sarah. Zion stared at the screen. His heart thudded so loud he thought the librarian might hear it. He read it again, and again. Thursday. A Nobel laureate. Speaking with him. He typed back, fingers flying. Yes. That works. Thank you. I'll be ready. He hit send. Thursday was 2 days away. But it might as well have been a lifetime. When he got home, he finally told his grandmother. She stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to measure the weight of what he had just said. Then she smiled. A smile that looked more like pride than joy. Your grandfather would have said, "Make them remember your name, baby," she whispered, placing a hand over his. "Now go remind the world." Thursday came. The day moved like syrup. Zion wore a collared shirt. His grandmother ironed with the same care she once gave his grandfather's lab coats. He sat in the living room, facing the old laptop they'd borrowed from the church. At 5:00 p.m. sharp, the screen flickered. A waiting room. Then connection. Dr. Arthur Bell appeared. He looked nothing like Zion expected. Slightly graying, shirt untucked, eyes tired but alert. He smiled gently. "Zion," he said, nodding. "We've been waiting to talk to you." Zion's voice trembled. "Hi. I didn't think you'd actually respond." Dr. Bell chuckled. "We don't get theories like yours often, especially not from 7th graders. Or anyone, frankly." Zion's screen froze for a second. But the moment didn't. Bell leaned in. "Let me be clear. Your energy reversibility theory, especially the way you referenced microstate matching, it aligns with a problem I've been working on for 15 years. You might not know this, Zion, but you've stumbled onto a frontier. You are ahead of your time." Zion couldn't move. He sat frozen, the words echoing. "You are ahead of your time." Bell continued. "The journals your grandfathers are a treasure. He was brilliant. It's criminal he wasn't published." Zion swallowed hard. They laughed at him. "They laughed at me too. They laugh until the data proves them wrong," Bell said. "Then they pretend they knew all along." Bell looked straight into the camera. "Would you be open to joining a virtual research session with my grad students next week? We'd like to explore your theory further. We'd also like to credit you in our upcoming paper, with your permission." Zion blinked. "Like, my name on it?" "Front page," Bell said. Zion's chest tightened. Not from fear, but from the unbearable feeling of being seen. But just as the call neared its end, Bell added something unexpected. "I do need to warn you. If we publish this, there will be people, powerful people, who won't like it. Especially because you're the one who brought it to light. Not everyone's ready for a black child from Dayton to redefine their science." Zion nodded slowly. "Let them try to stop me." Bell smiled. "Then let's get to work." They said their goodbyes. The screen went dark. Zion sat there, silent. The room around him still smelled like old books and cornbread. But his world had cracked open. He turned to see his grandmother wiping her eyes quietly behind the doorframe. She didn't say a word, but the tears were enough. The assistant asked for a Zoom call, with the Nobel laureate himself. Saturday came with heavy rain, the kind that coated the windows in beads and blurred the outside world into something soft and distant. It was the kind of weather that kept people inside, but for Zion Keaton, the storm only amplified everything swirling inside his chest. His grandmother had made sure the living room was quiet, tidied, and still. She'd placed a small plate of cookies next to the old laptop, though he hadn't touched them. The screen was cracked on the corner, and the Wi-Fi lagged on good days. But today it wasn't about hardware. Today was about something bigger than either of them could name. Zion wore his best shirt buttoned down, navy blue, one size too big, and sat upright at the dining table, staring at the Zoom waiting room message, like it was a portal to another world. Then, without warning, the screen changed. There he was, Dr. Arthur Bell. Zion recognized him instantly, though the Nobel laureate looked more casual than expected. No lab coat, just a gray sweater, wire-rimmed glasses, and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of galaxies. Zion's heart thudded so loud he worried the mic might pick it up. "Zion," Dr. Bell said, smiling warmly. "It's a pleasure." Zion swallowed hard. "Thank you for responding. I didn't think
That we'd actually reply?" Bell chuckled. "You're not the first to think that, but you might be the first to send a theory that changed the trajectory of a year-long research project."
Zion blinked. "I just thought maybe it made sense." In my head, let me stop you right there, Bell interrupted gently. Your hypothesis about energy reversibility in isolated microstates isn't just plausible. It's revolutionary. You articulated a concept that's eluded some of the brightest minds in our field for decades. Zion felt the room tilt. Dr. Bell continued. You didn't just echo something familiar. You proposed a pattern of entropy behavior no one has dared to formalize. And the way you backed it with legacy notes from Keaton, your grandfather's work paired with yours, presents something that challenges the dominant thermodynamic paradigm. Zion's hands trembled slightly. They laughed at me in school. Said I was trying to sound smart. Bell sighed, folding his hands. They laughed at me too once. They still do in some rooms. But that laughter, it's often a shield. People mock what they're too afraid to understand. The call wasn't just a meeting. It was an ignition. Over the next 45 minutes, Dr. Bell asked Zion real questions. Complicated, technical ones. And Zion, without scripts or prompts, responded. Sometimes he stammered. Sometimes he paused too long. But every answer came from a place of genuine understanding. Bell nodded each time, impressed. You ever heard of the Bell-Yakov paradox? Bell asked at one point. Zion nodded slowly. It's the theory you published in 2007, the one about dual entropy timelines. Bell raised his eyebrows. Not many people remember that. But yes, your hypothesis explains what we couldn't in that paper. The fluctuations in state regression. Your idea gives them a map. It was the moment Zion had dreamed of. But even in that glow, reality clawed at the edges. Because while Zion was being seen here, in this small square on a screen, he remained invisible everywhere else. Back in Dayton, at Dalton Creek Middle School, Ms. Crane hadn't changed. If anything, she'd doubled down. The day before, she'd told the staff in the teacher's lounge that Zion had developed a savior complex and was parroting junk from the internet. Students whispered it in the hallway. Zion the genius, always said with a smirk. Even the principal, Mr. Hargrove, had called his parents, suggesting he might be under too much academic pressure, and offering counseling, as if Zion's excellence was a sign of mental imbalance. Zion hadn't told Dr. Bell that part. But maybe he didn't have to. Zion, Bell said, his tone suddenly serious. The reason I wanted this call wasn't just to praise you. It's also because I want you involved. Involved? Zion echoed. We're drafting a paper, a new submission to MIT Scientific Journal. Your theory and your grandfather's notes will form its spine, but we can't write it without you. We want to list you as co-author. Zion blinked. Me?
Bell smiled.
Yes. You, Zion Keaton. Co-author, recognized in a peer-reviewed academic publication. You earned it. The words hit like lightning. Not because they were flattering, but because they felt like justice. Like something that had been buried was finally surfacing. Zion stared at the screen, unsure how to breathe. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Bell said. And then keep going. Because if this is what you're capable of at 12, I need you to understand. This is just the beginning. Zion nodded slowly. Yes. I want to do it. A flicker of emotion passed through Bell's eyes. Maybe pride. Maybe relief. But then, just as the call was winding down, Dr. Bell leaned back and said something unexpected. By the way, he added, I forwarded your grandfather's notes to a friend of mine. She works in archival integrity at the National Research Preservation Council. Turns out, someone might have used your grandfather's theories, without credit. Zion leaned forward. What do you mean? Bell said. There's a 1994 thesis out of Stanford that includes several diagrams nearly identical to Elias Keaton's sketches. No citation, no reference. If that's true, it's not just academic theft, it's racial erasure. Zion felt the air leave his lungs. He had always believed his grandfather had been robbed. Now it was no longer a theory. It was proof. Buried, stolen, and now, rising back to the surface. We're going to look into it, Bell said. Carefully. Quietly. But Zion, your family's story might be even bigger than your theory. Zion stared at the screen. He wasn't just rewriting science. He was reclaiming stolen history. Dr. Bell offered Zion a chance to co-author a paper for MIT's scientific journal. Zion returned to school Monday morning with a mind full of quantum equations and his name on the draft of a scientific paper. But at Dalton Creek Middle, none of that mattered. Not to the security guard who checked his ID badge twice like he didn't belong. Not to the kids who muttered Professor Poindexter under their breath when he passed. And definitely not to Miss Crane, who barely glanced at him as he walked into room 214, even though his face had just appeared in a university newsletter. Zion had spent the weekend in virtual research labs, attending MIT Zoom lectures with students nearly twice his age. He had taken notes, asked questions, and more than once, been praised by doctoral candidates who admitted they hadn't thought of a theory the way he had.
But when he walked into Ms. Crane's class, the weight of his backpack wasn't from books. It was from the sneers, the whispers, the way every step felt like a dare to just disappear.
He sat down and pulled out his notebook. Miss Crane's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Zion. A word after class. The lesson dragged. Kinetic energy. Potential energy. Nothing new. When the bell rang, Zion stood still, while the other students filtered out. Miss Crane leaned against her desk, arms crossed. I spoke to the principal. We've been informed that you've been corresponding with professors at MIT. Zion didn't respond. Miss Crane continued. Some teachers think that's impressive. I think it's suspicious. Zion's heart sank. He could feel where this was going. I've seen students plagiarize before, she said casually, circling her desk like a hawk, usually from the internet. But this is new, fabricating academic connections, citing fake professors. It's quite creative, actually. Zion finally looked up. It's not fake. She smiled thinly. We'll see. That afternoon, Zion's parents were called in. They sat across from Ms. Crane and Principal Hargrove in the school's administrative office, with a printout of Zion's recent homework on the table, highlighted, circled, scrutinized, like a criminal file. We're concerned, Hargrove said gently. This kind of advanced work is unexpected. Zion's mother stared at him. Are you saying he's cheating? Ms. Crane answered. We're saying we need to verify that his work is. Zion's father, usually quiet, spoke up. So instead of encouraging him, you're accusing him. No one is accusing, the principal deflected. We're just surprised. Zion sat still, eyes locked on a crack in the office tile. He'd seen this dance before. Gifted black kids weren't praised. They were questioned, doubted, flattened. That night, Zion logged into his MIT lecture late. He didn't turn his camera on. He couldn't. The day had drained something from him. But halfway through the session, Dr. Bell paused mid-sentence and said, Zion, what do you think? You wrote something about this in your last email, didn't you? Zion hesitated. Then he unmuted. I said entropy isn't a straight line. I think in microstate systems it loops, but only when conditions echo a previous state. Like a memory. A pause, then claps. Actual claps, from a few grad students. Exactly, Bell said. That's what we were missing. Thank you. Zion's face wasn't visible on screen, but he was smiling, just a little. That moment, though small, fueled him for the rest of the week. Back at Dalton Creek, things got worse. Students had caught wind of Zion's rising reputation. One posted a meme in the hallway. A photo of Zion's face photoshopped into a cartoon of a nerd being thrown in a locker. He walked past it in silence. He didn't have time to fight images. He was busy helping a lab team at MIT figure out entropy mapping. But Miss Crane wasn't done. The following Monday, she made an announcement to the class. We'll be having a school-wide science fair, she said, eyes scanning the room, but landing directly on Zion. It's mandatory. No partners. Everyone must present a unique project. And of course, she smiled, original work only. Some students glanced at Zion. A few snickered. He didn't react, not on the surface. But inside something curled. This wasn't about learning. It was about control. About forcing him to prove again that he belonged in a space she couldn't imagine him occupying. That afternoon, Zion found a private spot in the library and opened his email. A new message had arrived from Bell's assistant. Subject: Publishing Timelines. Zion, Dr. Bell wants to confirm your authorship credit for the final draft. We'll be submitting to the MIT Scientific Journal within the next 2 weeks. He also wants to know if you'd be willing to present your part of the theory via webinar to the undergraduate research team. Let us know. Zion exhaled slowly. He was 12 years old, being asked to present a scientific theory at one of the most respected institutions in the country. And back in Dayton, he was being forced into a science fair, just to prove he didn't cheat. That night, Zion sat on his bedroom floor with his grandfather's journals spread out in front of him. He wasn't angry. He was focused, sharp, steady. Okay, he whispered to the journals. Let's give them a show. His project wouldn't be just another demonstration. He was going to build a simplified entropy feedback loop system, one that showed energy's ability to return to prior states based on environmental triggers. He would use recycled parts, old speakers, obsolete circuit boards from the local donation bin. Nothing flashy, but brilliant. Still, something tugged at the back of his mind. An unease, a worry he hadn't yet named. The science fair wasn't just about the science. It was about sabotage, and Zion could feel it coming. Ms. Crane assigned a new science fair project, just to prove Zion couldn't repeat his luck. The announcement for the mandatory science fair rolled out on a cold Wednesday morning, the kind where the classroom heaters sputtered and clanged like they were protesting the season. Ms. Crane stood at the front of the room with a clipboard tucked under her arm, smiling with a brightness that felt unnatural, forced, sharp, rehearsed. The kind of smile Zion had come to recognize as a warning. "Students," she called out, raising her voice above the restless shuffle of backpacks. "This year's science fair is going to be handled differently. No groups, no late submissions." And her eyes flickered toward Zion like twin knives. Absolutely no plagiarism. A few kids snickered. Someone whispered, "This is about him." Someone else added, "She's finally gonna expose him." Zion sat still, spine straight, face expressionless, the way he had learned to be when teachers seemed determined to break him down, molecule by molecule. He kept his notebook open, pen in hand, though he wasn't writing anything. His mind was already working, shifting through possibilities, searching for the trap hidden behind Miss Crane's announcement. Behind her, on the whiteboard, she'd written the rules in thick smudgy marker. Original work only. Mandatory participation. Strict judging panel. All projects presented publicly. And beneath it her signature flourished like this was a decree, not an assignment. She tapped the marker against the board. "This is an excellent opportunity for each of you to demonstrate your authentic knowledge of scientific principles. Not what you copy off the internet. Not what someone else writes for you. Authentic work." The word authentic was dragged out like gum stretching between teeth. Zion didn't react outwardly, but inside, something bristled. He already knew she had been telling students in the hallway that his so-called genius theory was nothing more than a lucky guess hijacked off YouTube. One girl in the cafeteria had loudly asked whether Zion was faking emails from MIT too. When he'd walked past, a boy had muttered, "Bet he cheats this project too." The racism wasn't loud enough for teachers to punish, but sharp enough to slice. Those sideways comments, those smirks, those harmless jokes, they accumulated like sediment around him. But at night, when the whispers of the school halls fell away, he logged into MIT's virtual lab and entered a completely different world. A world where graduate students took notes while he spoke. A world where Dr. Bell didn't treat him like a child or a fraud, but like a colleague. A world where curiosity wasn't a threat. Now he would have to step back into Ms. Crane's arena and play a game designed for him to lose. The week leading up to the fair felt like walking through fog. He held his MIT notes close, though he did not reference or copy them. He didn't need to. The theory lived in him now. Clear as breath, he began building an improved version of his entropy feedback loop, this time using old circuit boards salvaged from broken radios in his grandmother's basement and open-source modulation software. He coded himself. He crafted sensors to detect shifts in thermal variance, wired relays that activated under microstate echoes, and built a loop chamber from repurposed transparent tubing. The entire device, small, strange, and glowing faintly when active, looked nothing like the volcanoes and baking soda rockets the other kids were duct taping together. He knew that. He also knew Miss Crane was going to hate it. One night, as he worked, his grandmother came into the room and placed a steaming mug of tea beside him. "You're quiet," she said softly. "I'm thinking." She studied him for a moment. "You think so hard you forget to breathe." Zion didn't look up from the circuit board. "She wants to catch me messing up." "Then don't mess up." "It won't matter. They don't care if I'm right. They care if I'm me." His grandmother sighed, pulling a chair next to him. "When your grandfather was your age, he turned in a math assignment, with the answer solved a different way than the teacher taught. They marked it wrong even though it was right." "What did he do?" "Exactly what you're doing." She tapped the circuit board. "He built bigger things." Zion swallowed. "And look where he ended up." Her voice softened. "Baby, there are people who will never want you to rise, but there are others who will fight to lift you higher. You've already found some of them." He looked at his notes. The diagrams Bell had praised. The simulations he had run. The the concepts he had strengthened, and he nodded, just once. The project would speak louder than any accusation. The day of the science fair arrived with an icy wind that rattled the school's metal doors. Students filed into the gymnasium, which had been transformed with long rows of folding tables and colored poster boards taped up like makeshift gallery displays. The smell of glue sticks, paint, and nervous sweat hung in the air. Zion carried his project in a cardboard box marked fragile. His sneakers squeaked on the polished floor as he walked down the row of tables. Heads turned. A few kids whispered. Someone snickered. A girl muttered, "Here comes the prodigy." He ignored all of it. He set up his station, a black poster board with clean diagrams and labeled processes. His entropy loop device centered neatly, sensors calibrated, indicators ready. It didn't look exciting, but it looked precise, purposeful, scientific. Miss Crane walked by slowly, inspecting projects with a clipboard nearly as tall as her smugness. When she reached Zion's table, she stopped. Her eyes scanned the device, her lips tightening. "And what is this supposed to be?" Zion answered calmly. "A microstate energy feedback loop. To demonstrate conditional state reversibility." She scribbled something on her sheet. Hard. "And you built this?" she asked. "Yourself?"
Yes.
"No help?" "No help." She chuckled under her breath. "We'll see." She moved on, but not before whispering to another teacher, loudly enough for Zion to hear, "We're about to witness the world's most elaborate science fiction fan project." He didn't flinch. The judging panel soon entered. A local hardware store owner, a dentist who sponsored the school band, and a retired teacher who taught chemistry 30 years earlier, and now used a cane. They walked down the aisles with polite smiles, asking simple questions about vinegar and magnets. When they reached Zion's project, their expressions changed slightly, subtle stiffening. The hardware store owner squinted. "What exactly is this supposed to do?" Zion explained. Slowly, clearly, he demonstrated how the sensors triggered, how the loop chamber responded, how environmental echoes influenced energy behavior. They stared as if he were speaking another language. The dentist shook his head. "This looks complicated." The retired teacher frowned. "Too complicated. A middle school student built this?" "Yes," Zion answered quietly. They scribbled something on their sheets. None of it good. It didn't matter that Zion had documented every step. It didn't matter that he understood his work inside out. To them, complexity meant deceit. Intelligence meant suspicion. When they walked away, Zion stood alone beside his project. Other tables buzzed with chatter, parents taking pictures, kids laughing. His table stayed still, ignored, overlooked, deliberately bypassed. As the final judge was announced over the microphone, the room shifted. Students glanced around. Teachers adjusted their posture. Even Miss Crane stood up straighter, smoothing her blouse. A man stepped into the gym. Zion froze. He recognized the gait before he recognized the face. Measured, thoughtful, carrying a quiet intensity. The rain from outside still clung to his coat. A black cap covered his hair, and his eyes. His eyes scanned the tables like he already knew the answer. Dr. Arthur Bell, in Dayton, Ohio, at Dalton Creek Middle School. Walking in, as the final judge. The final judge was a surprise. Dr. Arthur Bell, who had flown in undercover. The sound of the gymnasium doors creaking open didn't cause much of a stir at first. Most students were too focused on fidgeting with their trifold boards, parents scrolling their phones, and teachers walking through the aisles with forced enthusiasm. The smell of cafeteria-grade punch and cold pizza hung in the air, mixing with the nerves and adolescent body spray. The man who entered wasn't flashy. He wore a weathered brown jacket, with soft tears at the cuffs, and a navy baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. A plain name tag stuck to his chest. Arthur, visiting judge, university guest. No last name, no fanfare. He carried a notebook, black leather-bound, well-used. Zion spotted him instantly. His hands tightened around the edge of the table. That face, even shadowed beneath the cap, was unmistakable. Dr. Arthur Bell. Here, in Dayton, in this gym, where he didn't belong, but somehow belonged more than anyone else. Zion blinked hard. Was this really happening? Dr. Bell didn't walk in, like a celebrity. He moved like a man surveying a battlefield, pausing thoughtfully at each table, listening closely, asking real questions. He nodded when appropriate, but never smiled too wide. There was something calculating in his calm, a scientist's instinct to observe before intervening. He reached Zion's table, after 20 minutes. By then Miss Crane had wandered back to Zion's row, as if waiting for this moment. She stood 3 tables down, pretending to chat with another student, but her gaze was fixed on Zion, and now the strange judge who had lingered at his booth longer than any of the others. Dr. Bell studied the project for several moments in silence. He leaned in and traced a finger along the sensor wires, then glanced at the labeled diagrams and energy loop feedback charts taped neatly to the board. Zion's voice was barely above a whisper. "Thank you for coming." Bell said nothing at first. His eyes didn't leave the model. "Would you mind," Bell asked gently, "walking me through it, from the beginning?" Zion took a breath. His palms were slick, but his voice carried. "This is a microstate energy feedback loop," he began. "It's based on conditional entropy reversibility. The system reads environmental echoes from prior energy states. When the environmental conditions match a previous configuration, the loop returns the energy to that state, like a memory." "Ewake." Bell nodded slowly. Zion continued, his words gaining speed. "It's not that energy remembers in a conscious way. It's that patterns of entropy aren't always linear in microstates. They can loop like feedback in a closed echo chamber, if certain boundaries remain stable." Bell scribbled something in his notebook. Ms. Crane, now clearly listening in, gave a light scoff. "That's ambitious." Bell turned slightly, but said nothing. He gestured toward the tubing. "And these sensors, what are they measuring?" "Thermal variance and vibrational decay," Zion said quickly. "If the shift aligns with the set range from an earlier event, the relay resets the loop to simulate a previous energy output." "I'm still calibrating the delays." Bell's eyes widened slightly. Another judge strolled over, peeking at Bell's notes. "You getting all that?" Bell smiled thinly. Yes. But I'll need to verify something after the fair. This is layered." Miss Crane laughed. "Well, he has had help. A lot of online inspiration, I imagine." Bell didn't respond to her. He looked directly at Zion. "Did you run simulations for varying entropy decay rates?" Zion nodded. 3 of them. "I ran it through open-source physics software. I modeled decay in both symmetrical and asymmetrical systems. Only symmetrical ones created reversible patterns." Bell wrote again. His hand was almost shaking. Then he stepped back. "Impressive," he said loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Zion felt heat rise to his face, but it wasn't embarrassment. It was something unfamiliar. Validation, loud and public in the very space designed to humiliate him. Bell nodded once. "I'll be back in a moment." He moved on slowly, but his presence left a quiet ripple in the gym. Miss Crane moved in the second Bell, stepped away. "Very articulate presentation, Zion," she said, voice dripping with false sweetness. "You really sound like you know what you're talking about." "I do," he replied, not meeting her gaze. She stepped closer. "Let's just hope the judges can tell the difference between real science and borrowed brilliance." Zion didn't blink. "They can." She narrowed her eyes, lips twitching. Across the room, Bell stopped walking. He turned. He stepped forward. Slow. Measure. He walked back toward Zion's booth, but this time didn't stop. He kept going right to the center of the gym. And then, without warning, he turned around, lifted his head, and cleared his throat. The microphone wasn't on, but somehow his voice carried. "Excuse me," he said, calm but commanding. "I'd like a moment." The room stilled. A teacher whispered, "Who is he?"
Bell removed his cap.
Miss Crane's face turned white. Gasps fluttered across the room like startled birds. Someone whispered, "Wait, is that—" "Yes," Bell said simply. "Dr. Arthur Bell. MIT. Nobel Prize for Quantum Thermodynamics." Miss Crane staggered back a step. "I wasn't going to say anything," Bell said, looking around. "But after seeing one particular project and hearing the undercurrent of accusations, I decided it's time I speak." Zion froze. Everyone froze. All eyes turned toward him. Dr. Bell stood up and addressed the entire gym. The gymnasium fell into an eerie silence. You could hear the subtle buzz of the overhead lights, the soft cough of a teacher in the back row, and the slow scraping sound of a student shifting nervously in their folding chair. All motion ceased as Dr. Arthur Bell stood at the center, his cap now off, name and identity fully exposed. Ms. Crane's expression collapsed inward. Her posture stiffened, jaw clenching, as if holding back panic. Zion stood at his table, heart drumming so loud it muffled the outside world. He didn't know what was coming, but he could feel something irreversible unfolding in real time. Dr. Bell scanned the gym, his voice carrying clearly now, deeper and more deliberate. I've walked through this fair pretending to be a judge named Arthur from a university. That was true, but what I didn't say is that I'm also Dr. Arthur Bell, lead researcher at MIT's Quantum Systems Lab, former NASA consultant, and recipient of the 2021 Nobel Prize in Quantum Thermodynamics. Gasps swept across the room like a sudden storm. Several parents stood from their seats. Students stared in disbelief, some mouths open, others already pulling out their phones. Bell didn't pause for applause. There was none. Just awe. And I've come here for one reason, he said. To evaluate in person the work of a student who contacted me weeks ago with a theory so advanced, so precise, that my research team assumed it had come from a graduate student or a professor. Bell's eyes landed on Zion. That student is him. Every head turned. Phones lifted. Zion's classmates looked stunned. The same kids who laughed at his diagrams, who whispered jokes in the lunch line, now froze. Bell walked back to Zion's table, hand resting gently on the edge. This young man proposed a solution to a thermodynamic question our lab has been struggling with for over a year. His work not borrowed, not guided, but developed with his own hands, an inherited wisdom, is decades ahead of anything being taught in this building. Ms. Crane took a cautious step forward. Dr. Bell, with all due respect. No, Bell said sharply, raising a hand. No, you don't get to respectfully doubt him anymore. I've heard the murmurs. I've read the notes. I've even been sent screenshots of internal emails. The level of disregard shown to this student doesn't stem from academic skepticism. It stems from something else. He turned to the audience. It stems from the quiet racism that masquerades as professionalism. The kind that doesn't shout the N-word, but instead whispers, he's too confident, or he's getting ahead of himself, or someone must be helping him. You could hear a pin drop. Ms. Crane's face turned pale. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Bell's voice was steady, but burning now. Let's stop pretending this is about science. This is about what you all believed a black boy from Dayton, with hand-me-down shoes and a fatherless report card, could never figure out on his own. The crowd rippled with shock. A few parents pulled out their phones, recording now. Others looked at each other, uncomfortable. The truth in Bell's words didn't just land. It detonated. Zion didn't know what to do with his hands. He felt exposed, elevated, overwhelmed. But above all, he felt seen. Bell gestured to Zion's entropy loop model. I've taught thousands of students, reviewed countless papers. What he's done here with recycled parts and public code rivals simulations funded by grants. And what did his school do? He glanced at the judges, at the administrators standing near the bleachers. They tried to catch him failing. Miss Crane spoke up, her voice forced calm. We just wanted to be sure his work was authentic. Bell turned. And why wasn't that same scrutiny applied to anyone else in this room? Why weren't all the projects checked for authenticity? Why weren't all the students called into meetings with their parents to prove they weren't cheating? Silence. One of the student judges, a retired teacher, lowered his clipboard. A student near the front whispered, "He's right." Bell stepped back toward the center of the gym. If I had never shown up, this boy would have been discredited, humiliated, pushed back into the box so many of you seemed desperate to keep him in. Zion's heart pounded harder now. The lump in his throat was tight, painful. Not sadness, not even anger. Something deeper, something final. Bell looked at him now. Just him. Zion Keaton is the most promising young physicist I've encountered in 20 years. And what makes him exceptional isn't just his mind, it's his courage. He came here knowing he'd be doubted, knowing he'd be mocked. And he stood anyway. Several parents began clapping slow at first, then growing. Students joined, some with guilt, some with awe, all with eyes locked on Zion. Miss Crane remained frozen, her hands clenched around her clipboard. Bell turned to the crowd. You laughed, and you were wrong. The applause rose louder. But now, Bell added, raising a finger, you have a choice. You can keep laughing, or you can start listening. The applause thundered now. Zion's eyes watered, but he didn't cry. He wouldn't. Not yet. A woman near the front, An aunt of a student shouted, "Say his name again." Bell turned. Zion Keaton. The gym echoed with it. Phones kept recording. Miss Crane turned and quietly walked out of the gym. Zion watched her go. Not with satisfaction. Not with vengeance. Just understanding. She had tried to erase him, and now her silence was being recorded by hundreds. The fair ended early. No one cared about volcanoes or vinegar anymore. All eyes were on the kid who rewrote physics in his grandmother's living room. But the story didn't end there. That night, the video of Bell's speech, filmed from 3 angles, posted by a student with the caption "He came for Zion," hit social media. By morning it had 2.1 million views. The video of the moment went viral overnight. By sunrise the world had already shifted. What began as a low-quality, handheld video from a middle school gymnasium in Dayton, Ohio, exploded into the bloodstream of the internet, like a voltage surge. The clip of Dr. Arthur Bell pointing to a quiet black boy in a collared shirt and saying, "You laughed and you were wrong," hit social media hours after the fair ended, and then it caught fire. By 8 a.m. it had reached 7 million views. By noon it was unavoidable. It was stitched into reaction videos on TikTok, quoted in tweets, captioned on Instagram, and discussed on live panels. Influencers who didn't know a single thing about thermodynamics posted reaction videos in tears. Civil rights advocates reposted it with context about systemic racism in education. Science communicators broke down Zion's theory for the average person, while tech CEOs quietly followed his barely used account. The hashtags came fast. Zion was right. Black genius. Let him cook. The Zion effect. Cable news stations replayed Bell's speech on loop with bold headlines like "Nobel laureate shocks school," praises 12-year-old prodigy, and "Ohio boy rewrites physics while teacher looks on in disbelief." It wasn't just the speech. It was the look on Miss Crane's face. The still frame of her frozen expression as Bell addressed the gym went viral on its own. Captioned with "Everything from racism doesn't always scream. It smirks to the face of underestimated excellence." That morning, 2 media vans were parked in front of Dalton Creek Middle School. A third was circling for footage. Reporters approached students as they arrived, asking, "Do you know Zion? Was he always this smart? Did you see what happened?" Zion didn't go to school that day. His parents kept him home, not out of fear but to let him breathe. He sat in his grandmother's living room, curled on the couch, watching his own name scroll across the news ticker. The attention didn't feel good. It didn't feel bad. It felt strange, like the world was looking at him for the first time, but with eyes too wide, too hungry, too unsure of what they were even seeing. His phone buzzed non-stop. Messages from strangers, scientists, students, activists. Some wanted to praise him. Others wanted to study him. A few simply wanted to be near whatever glow he had sparked. Zion silenced the notifications and opened his notebook. He needed quiet. He needed math. At Dalton Creek, chaos unfolded. Miss Crane arrived to find her classroom door tagged with sticky notes that read, "Shame on you," and he was right. Her email inbox was flooded with angry messages, screenshots of her public Facebook comments from the past year now surfacing in waves. Microaggressions captured forever. She deleted her social media before noon. But it was too late. A local radio station played audio from the gym speech on loop, while callers shared personal stories of being ignored, underestimated, or silenced in school. "She reminded me of my high school teacher," one caller said. "Said my essays were too good to be mine." Another caller wept openly on air. "I wish I had a Dr. Bell when I was 14. The school district panicked. Public relations sent a rushed statement to media outlets. "We support all students in their academic journey and are investigating all claims seriously." It said everything and nothing. Meanwhile, inside the school, the students who had mocked Zion tried to recalibrate. Some posted supportive comments online, pretending they had always believed in him. A few even edited their Instagram bios to include "Zion was right," but others weren't so quick to change. In hushed tones in the locker room and the back of class, a new narrative formed. "He's just lucky. He didn't really write that paper. I bet the professor just used him to make a statement." Zion couldn't hear them, but he didn't have to. He already knew what they whispered when people like him started shining. That evening, CNN called. They wanted to fly him to New York. An education nonprofit offered to cover travel and accommodations for his family. A podcast invited him to guest host a science segment. The White House, the actual White House, sent a press inquiry. Zion said no to all of it. He wasn't trying to become a symbol. He didn't want to speak for a movement or headline a news cycle. He just wanted to keep learning. He sat quietly at the kitchen table that night, a plate of untouched food beside him, sketching a new circuit on scrap paper. His grandmother stood nearby, stirring tea. "Do you want this to go away?" she asked softly. Zion didn't look up. "Might want it to get quiet again." She nodded. "The world doesn't get quiet when you're black and brilliant." He paused his drawing. "Do I have to fix the world now?" he whispered. "No, baby," she said gently. "Just don't let it break you." At 9:13 p.m., an email arrived. Subject line: Harvard Young Scholars Initiative. Zion stared at it for a long time before opening it. "Dear Zion, my name is Dr. Camille Rivers, Director of Harvard's Young Scholars Program. We saw your presentation and reviewed your early papers. Based on your work and with the full endorsement of Dr. Arthur Bell, we would like to offer you immediate admission into our accelerated program. Full scholarship, housing included. If accepted, you would be our youngest scholar at 13. We'd be honored to have you. Sincerely, Dr. Rivers." Zion didn't move. He just sat there staring at the screen. The world wasn't just looking at him now. It wanted to pull him in. A Harvard recruiter sent an invitation, full scholarship. The letter from Harvard sat on the kitchen table for hours before Zion touched it again. It didn't shimmer or glow. It wasn't embossed in gold, just a plain email, with quiet, world-shifting power. He didn't announce it to the world. There was no viral post, no confetti, no interviews. It felt too sacred for noise. 3 weeks later, Zion and his grandfather boarded a train east, away from the crumbling sidewalks of Dayton, toward Cambridge, Massachusetts, where red bricks held centuries of power and the air carried the sharp, invisible weight of legacy. His parents stayed behind. His mother cried quietly at the station. His father, usually stern, hugged him twice without speaking. His grandmother pressed a folded note into his hand and said only, "For when the rooms get cold." The campus was overwhelming. The buildings weren't just old, they were mythic, arched and towering, the kind of structures built by people who never imagined a black boy from Ohio might one day walk through them. Zion's dorm was small but clean. A single window overlooked a courtyard filled with students twice his age, moving with the kind of careless confidence that came from belonging. Zion didn't belong, not at first. The Young Scholars Program assigned him a graduate student mentor named Jason Ling, a mechanical engineer with a quiet voice and tired eyes. Jason helped him get settled, handed him an old map of campus, and walked him through his first lab tour. "You're basically a legend already," Jason joked. "The professors are all whispering about the kid who rewrote entropy." Zion forced a smile, but whispers still made his skin crawl. Orientation came with polite applause and awkward stares. Some students welcomed him, genuinely curious and warm. Others stared like he was a novelty exhibit. Harvard's latest diversity headline. In one seminar, the professor called him Mr. Keaton, in an amused tone, after Zion offered a solution to a particularly complex equation on the board. The room fell silent. One student, older, white and unimpressed, muttered just loud enough, "Must be the new face of affirmative action." Zion didn't respond. He didn't have to. The professor rewrote the board and said quietly, "He's right." Still, the comment lingered like smoke in a closed room. The culture shock came in waves. It wasn't just the academic rigor. Zion could handle that. It was the casual exclusion, the way study groups formed without him, the way professors avoided eye contact after he outperformed their expectations, the subtle way people mentioned his story more than his science. He became a symbol when he had only ever wanted to be a student. His grandfather noticed the change. "You're walking like the air's heavier here," he said one night. "It is," Zion replied quietly. His grandfather nodded. "Then walk stronger." They didn't speak of it again. But Zion started keeping a journal. A private record, not of his theories, but of his feelings. He wrote about the isolation, the quiet microaggressions, the way people smiled with tight lips when he spoke in lectures. And still he excelled. Zion submitted his first co-authored paper with Dr. Bell, and was later asked to present it to a panel of visiting physicists. He joined a lab team that was developing AI-assisted simulations of entropy collapse. His ideas were not just welcomed, they became foundational. Yet, every time he opened a classroom door, he braced himself for the possibility that someone was waiting to disbelieve him again.
Then came the headline.
The myth of Zion Keaton is Harvard's youngest scholar, a fraud. It was published by a right-wing media outlet, notorious for exposing liberal agendas. The article accused Zion of fabricating his early credentials. It claimed his emails to Dr. Bell were ghostwritten, that his grandfather's journals were forged, that Bell had chosen Zion for optics, not merit. The article cited anonymous academic sources. Within hours, the story spread across conservative corners of the internet. The headlines got sharper. Another affirmative action lie, black privilege in academia, 12-year-old genius exposed as MIT propaganda puppet. Zion's inbox filled with threats. One email read, "You're just a kid. Know your place." Another, "No way a ghetto kid figured out entropy. This is all for show." Zion shut down his email, deleted his social apps, and sat in the dark for hours. His grandfather found him curled up on the couch, staring at nothing. "Talk to me," he said softly. Zion's voice cracked. "What if they're right? What if no one ever sees me without thinking I don't belong?" His grandfather knelt down. "You remember that note I gave you?" Zion nodded. He pulled it from his hoodie pocket, unfolded it. It read, "Let your truth be louder than their noise." He stared at it for a long time. Then, slowly, he stood. The next morning, Harvard released a formal statement. They defended Zion's credentials with clarity and force. They confirmed every step of his application, verified his contributions to published research, released a timeline of his academic interactions with Dr. Bell's lab, and ended the statement with, "Mr. Zion Keaton is not just welcome here, he is necessary here." Dr. Bell released a personal video message that same evening. In it he said, "Zion's mind is not a media story. It's a miracle of perseverance, ancestry, and unrelenting curiosity. And for anyone who doubts him, read his work. Then try to keep up." The video reached over 5 million views. Still, the damage had been done. Zion returned to class the next week with eyes on him that no longer hid their scrutiny. Every question he asked in lecture felt like a test. Every answer he gave was met with either disbelief or forced praise. He was no longer just a student. He was a battlefield. A conservative media outlet accused Zion of faking his credentials. The article's title was designed to pierce. The grooming of Zion Keaton, liberal elite's latest child star. It wasn't just misleading. It was an orchestrated strike, a blend of coded racism, manufactured doubt, and weaponized resentment. By the time Zion saw the headline, it had already been shared nearly 100,000 times across forums, newsletters, and video thumbnails dripping with venomous commentary. Zion didn't read the full article. He couldn't. But the excerpts that made their way to his inbox were enough. A glorified diversity mascot paraded by Ivy League scientists to score political points. Convenient how no one ever saw the boy's original notes. MIT's golden child can't even legally vote, but somehow he's solving problems grown men can't. The comment sections were worse. No moderation, just raw, boiling hatred, racist caricatures, memes calling him a science minstrel. A user on a right-wing board posted, "He'll be working at a fast food joint by 16 once the smoke clears." His inbox imploded. Hundreds of messages in a matter of hours, some full of sarcasm cloaked as advice. "Maybe you should stick to basketball." Others more violent. "We know your dorm. Watch your back, fraud. Stay in your place." Zion shut his laptop and didn't open it for 3 days. He stopped responding to Dr. Bell's emails, skipped 2 lab meetings, canceled his lecture slot. He lay in his narrow dorm bed at night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of campus life outside his window, conversations, laughter, footsteps, none of which he felt connected to anymore. This wasn't just about his science. This was about who the world wanted him to be, and who it couldn't stand that he was. Dr. Bell called on the 4th day. Zion didn't answer at first. Then, reluctantly, he picked up. The voice on the other end was calm, as always, but carried an edge of worry. "You haven't been in the lab." "I know," Zion said flatly. "I read the article. I saw the threats. You okay?" Zion hesitated. "I don't know," he whispered. "It feels like I became something they have to destroy." Bell paused. "They don't hate your ideas, Zion. They hate that you had them. A black boy, born poor, standing on a stage they think belongs to them." Zion didn't speak. Bell continued. "I can't shield you from all of it. I wish I could. But this backlash, It's not because you did something wrong. It's because you did something right. Zion's voice cracked. It's not just noise anymore. They're coming after who I am. Belle's tone softened. Then you fight by continuing to be who you are. Don't disappear. That's what they want. Back on campus, things were fractured. Some students avoided Zion entirely, unsure how to act around someone caught in a political firestorm. Others went out of their way to support him, offering hugs, affirmations, even defense in comment threads. But even kindness became a kind of pressure. He was no longer a kid, no longer a student. He was a symbol, and symbols aren't allowed to be tired, or broken, or scared. One afternoon he found a message slid under his door. No sender. Just 5 words written in scratchy marker. Prove them wrong.
Again.
Zion stared at it for minutes. Then he folded the note and put it in his pocket. The twist came from where no one expected. A journalist named Quinn Ramsey, known for quiet, in-depth reporting that often took months to unfold, sent Dr. Bell a request for comment. Not about Zion, but about Ms. Crane. I've been following the media's shift on Zion Keaton, Ramsey wrote. But something about the timing of the right-wing takedown felt rehearsed. Ramsey had traced the source of one of the earliest tips to a private email chain, where educators from different districts had exchanged complaints about Zion's rise. It was informal, hard to track, but buried in a chain of forwarded threads was something more direct. An email from Mallory.Crane, adalton.quat.do, US, sent to a media contact from the same outlet that published the viral hit piece. Subject: a story you might want to tell. Attached: an old homework assignment from Zion, an edited photo of his project. A personal note describing Zion as manipulative, attention-seeking, and a pawn for academic elites. The reporter cross-verified the email through digital metadata. It was real. Dr. Bell sat in stunned silence when he read it. He forwarded it immediately to Harvard's legal team and the university's DA office. Then he made a call to Zion. You need to see something, Bell said. When Zion read the email, he didn't cry. He didn't scream. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, finally, she sent it. She fed them. Bell's voice was steady. They didn't find you. They were pointed to you. Zion leaned back, eyes closed, as something heavy inside him snapped into clarity. Miss Crane hadn't just tried to silence him in the classroom. She had continued, long after he left her school, trying to dismantle him from the shadows. And now there was proof. An investigative reporter uncovered emails between Miss Crane and the media outlet. The screenshots were undeniable, dozens of them, each time-stamped and traceable, laid bare what Zion and Dr. Bell had suspected for weeks. Miss Mallory Crane hadn't just been quietly bitter about Zion's success. She had actively worked behind the scenes to sabotage him on a national scale. The emails painted a chilling narrative. To one media contact, she wrote, "You may want to look into the so-called genius MIT and Harvard are parading around. A little too convenient, don't you think?" In another, he was always manipulative. He made staff uncomfortable. "I suspect some psychological instability. I'm happy to talk off the record." And more damning still, she forwarded a doctored copy of Zion's old science report with minor factual errors inserted. Errors that didn't exist in the original copy Zion had submitted. She marked them in red with the note, "See what he really knew." It was more than just slander. It was a deliberate, orchestrated character assassination, launched not just against a student, but a child. Zion stared at the printed emails in the Harvard legal office. His hands were still, his eyes unreadable. "She used her position," he said quietly, "to try and erase me." Across the table, Dr. Bell nodded. "And now she's going to answer for it." The university's legal team moved quickly. Harvard's Office of Institutional Integrity released a statement confirming it had turned over the documents to the Dayton School District, demanding a full investigation into Ms. Crane's conduct. Within 48 hours, the district superintendent announced the immediate suspension of Ms. Crane, pending an internal review. News outlets pounced. The woman who once stood at the center of the viral video, her silence viewed as shame, now re-emerged as a key antagonist. Her name trended. This time, not as a symbol of disbelief, but as an alleged villain. Crane cover-up. Justice for Zion. She tried to erase him. The headlines sharpened. Teacher who mocked young genius behind smear campaign. From laughter to lies, the downfall of Ms. Mallory Crane. Zion's lawyer, a seasoned civil rights attorney from Boston, Drafted a defamation suit within the week. The 48-page filing included direct quotes from Miss Crane's emails, evidence of reputational damage, and a demand for public retraction and damages. It was the first time Zion had gone on the offensive. Until now he had endured, withstood, survived. Now, he was fighting back with facts. For Miss Crane, the fallout was swift. She was removed from the classroom immediately. Parents at Dalton Creek demanded an emergency town hall. The school board received over 6,000 emails within a weekend, calling for her termination and a district-wide audit of teacher conduct. But perhaps more shocking was what came next. A message arrived in Dr. Bell's inbox. Then another. Then 3 more. Former students. All with the same subject line. I had her too. One woman, now in her late 20s, wrote, "She told me I was too sassy for science. Docked me points for using words she said sounded rehearsed. I stopped answering in class." Another. "She called me aggressive for asking why my score was lower than others with the same answers. I still remember the smirk." A third. "She gave me detention for plagiarism, because I used a word she didn't think I knew." Each message a piece of a larger mosaic.
Miss Crane hadn't just tried to destroy Zion.
She had been quietly diminishing black students for years. One comment, one lowered grade, one accusation at a time. Harvard arranged a meeting between Zion and his legal team. They discussed next steps, public statements, legal strategy, media inquiry. But Zion, seated in the corner of the conference room, raised his hand. "I want her to be held accountable," he said, voice even. "But I also want her history exposed." "You mean her past students?" his attorney asked. "I mean her pattern," Zion replied. "This wasn't a one-time thing. She didn't just hate me, she hated what I represented." Dr. Bell leaned in. "Then we help others speak." That evening, Zion drafted a letter. Not a legal brief, not a press release. A letter. To his former classmates at Dalton Creek. To the alumni. To the ones who had sat in the same desks, faced the same woman, and heard the same subtle ways she said "you're not enough." He posted it to his social account, with a single line. "If she ever silenced you, tell your story. Now's the time." Within 24 hours, the thread had thousands of replies. Stories poured in, not just from his school, but from others where teachers like Miss Crane had gone unchecked. It became a collective outpouring of grief and truth. A reckoning. Media outlets picked it up. One journalist titled their piece, "Zion Keaton Opened the Door," and the silence fell apart. Meanwhile, Miss Crane hired a lawyer, released a statement denying any malicious intent, claimed the emails were taken out of context, accused the media of launching a smear campaign. But the court of public opinion had already moved. And behind that, the legal process was just beginning. Zion watched it unfold from a quiet corner of campus. No press, no speeches, just him, a notebook, and the hum of the university's energy center, vibrating through the walls, like a hidden engine. He had once been afraid to speak. Now his voice was a catalyst. But the story wasn't over. Because just as the lawsuit gained momentum, just as Miss Crane's history unraveled, a name surfaced. A former student. From years ago. One no one expected. With allegations that would shake the district even further. A former student of Miss Crane came forward with shocking allegations. Her name was Nadine Ellis. She hadn't spoken to anyone from Dalton Creek Middle School in almost 15 years. She lived in Chicago now, an ER nurse, a mother of 2, and someone who had buried her middle school years deep beneath career and family. But when she saw Zion Keaton's name trending again, this time alongside Mallory Crane's, something inside her cracked. She opened her email. She didn't draft it carefully. She wrote with trembling fingers, in a burst of memory that felt like ripping open a locked drawer. She used to call me belligerent for asking questions, took off points for my tone in written work, made me rewrite an essay 3 times because I used the word paradox. And she told me, "That's not a word someone like you just knows." She sent it to the journalist who had uncovered Crane's email campaign. Then she shut her laptop, stood in her kitchen, and cried. It was the first time in years she had said the teacher's name out loud. The journalist, Quinn Ramsey, followed up within an hour. Then came the interview. Nadine shared details. Specific incidents, names of classmates who witnessed them. How Crane had separated black students during group projects. How she only offered tutoring to white students after school. How she once told Nadine that respect had to be earned, and you people always expect it for free. Nadine remembered freezing. You people. No one had believed her then. But now she wasn't alone. After the article published, headlined Crane's Past Revisited, former student breaks silence, the ripple became a wave. More alumni came forward.
One by one.
Each story different, but disturbingly similar. I was accused of cheating every time I got an A. She asked if I needed ESL support because I spoke too loud. I was born here. She told me to stop acting urban during a group presentation. She once told my mom I was defiant by nature. I was 12. The stories flooded message boards, Twitter threads, Instagram stories. Anonymous at first, then names, faces, old yearbook photos. A former staff member, who asked to remain unnamed, admitted in a voice message, "We all knew she had a problem with certain kids, but she never yelled, never cursed. She kept it subtle. You couldn't prove it. That was her genius." But now it was all stacking up. The puzzle was finally complete. Mallory Crane had not been a rogue teacher with a grudge against one student. She had been an institutional wound, quiet, precise, and destructive, and she had lasted for over 2 decades. The local newspaper, the Dayton Gazette, ran the story front page, full width, no ads above the fold. The racism hiding in plain sight. How one teacher silenced a generation. It included direct quotes from Nadine, timelines, student testimonies, and an investigative breakdown of her disciplinary patterns. Black students were 4 times more likely to receive behavior citations in her classroom. Nearly half had been recommended for academic intervention. None of those patterns had triggered alarms, because no one had been looking. Until now, the school board could no longer avoid it. Public pressure mounted. Protest formed outside Dalton Creek's administrative offices. Former students and their parents held signs that read "Believe Black Kids," and one name, many stories. Within days, the board scheduled a public hearing, open to the community, and after national attention turned toward Dayton again, announced it would be live-streamed nationwide. The decision shocked everyone. The board president, a cautious man named Henry Lavelle, had resisted media coverage for years. But under immense pressure, he had no choice. "This isn't just about a teacher anymore," he said during a press briefing. "This is about every adult who saw smoke and asked no questions. It's about our failure to listen, and now we'll do so. Publicly." Zion watched it unfold with quiet intensity. He hadn't spoken about Miss Crane in days. Not to the press, not to Belle, not even to his parents, but he was watching, closely. Not for revenge, for something deeper, for validation that his pain wasn't an isolated glitch, but evidence of a pattern, a rot, that had worn a teacher's smile for too long. In Cambridge, Zion's dorm was quiet. He sat with his grandfather in the common area, watching footage of the protest on his tablet. "Do you want to speak at the hearing?" his grandfather asked. Zion shook his head. "I already did. When I didn't sit down." His grandfather nodded slowly. "Then maybe this one is for the rest of them." The hearing was set for Friday night. The list of speakers included former students, education advocates, and legal counsel for the district. But the final spot on the list was marked, witness, Nadine Ellis. She would speak, live, with the nation watching. The school board scheduled a public hearing to be live-streamed nationwide. The gymnasium had never seen this many lights. Flood lamps, camera rigs, microphones on every surface. Folding chairs were lined wall to wall, and a podium was set center stage beneath the Dalton Creek District emblem. The same space where Zion had stood beside his science project now held the weight of a city's reckoning. By 6:30 p.m. the live stream had over 800,000 viewers. By 7:00 p.m. that number doubled. CNN carried it live. So did MSNBC. Even C-SPAN, usually reserved for federal hearings and dry policy debates, streamed the school board event under the headline, "Zion Keaton versus the system that failed him." Zion arrived quietly, wearing a fitted navy blazer and pressed black slacks. His grandfather walked beside him, not to protect him but to remind him of where he came from. Belle flew in that morning and sat in the second row, silent, still watching everything like a man studying a fragile ecosystem. Miss Crane entered minutes later through a side door. She looked unrecognizable, hair pulled back too tight, her blazer wrinkled, hands trembling, as she clutched a folder filled with her notes. Her eyes didn't search the crowd. She walked like someone already underwater. The board president, Henry Lavelle, gaveled the hearing to order. "We are here," he began, to address allegations brought forward against educator Mallory Crane, and to hear from current and former students, legal representatives, and those directly impacted by the events surrounding this case. No opening statements. No legal padding. Just truth. Nadine Ellis spoke first. Her voice was calm, her testimony clear. I was told my confidence was threatening. I was 12. I was given detention for defending my grade. I was told to be more like the quiet girls. I've carried that into adulthood, into job interviews, into moments where I hesitate before asking questions. The audience murmured in response. One woman in the back wiped tears from her eyes. The chat stream on the live stream exploded. Protect Nadine. We believe you. The quiet girl. This is why Zion matters. 3 more former students followed. Each story added layers. Laughter at the wrong time. Praise withheld. Creativity penalized. All subtle. All deniable. Until now. Then it was Miss Crane's turn. She stepped to the podium. Voice shaky. I want to start by saying I never intended to harm any student. She began. Any actions I took were in the interest of academic integrity and structure. The classroom must be a place of standards. Her eyes scanned the board. No one met them. I was never racist. I didn't treat Zion unfairly. I simply asked questions others were afraid to ask. Are we no longer allowed to challenge a student's work without fear of being labeled? Whispers rippled through the room. Then unexpectedly, a voice from the front row spoke up. It was Dr. Bell. You challenged him, he said calmly, but not his white peers. That's the difference. The room stilled. Crane froze. The board president gestured for order, but the energy had already shifted. Crane faltered. I didn't know the video would go viral. I didn't know he was special. Zion raised his head at that. He didn't flinch. He didn't rise. He simply stood when the board president called his name. His walk to the podium was quiet, composed. He adjusted the mic, looked straight ahead, not at Miss Crane, not at Dr. Bell, not even at the cameras, straight into the heart of the system. When I gave my answer in class, people laughed, he said softly. I remember the sound. I remember how it felt to know I was right, and still be laughed at. Murmurs stirred again. But this was never just about a wrong answer, or a tough teacher. It was about how people like me are always expected to be lucky, but never brilliant. His words rang out, sharp and precise. When I proved them wrong, they didn't apologize. They got quiet, and then they tried to silence me again. Through doubt, through lies, through a smear campaign built on an old teacher's bitterness. Miss Crane looked down. Zion continued, but I'm still here, and what matters now isn't that I was right. It's that I should never have had to prove it like this. A pause. You all laughed, he said, this time louder, firmer, like stone breaking water. But I was right. The room burst into applause. Not loud, not chaotic, but real. The kind that vibrates through floorboards. The board president cleared his throat. Let's proceed to closing remarks and deliberation. But before they could move, a parent stood up in the crowd. I have something to say. Lovell hesitated. Sir, this is not... The man stepped forward anyway. I'm a father of 3, he said. 2 of them had Miss Crane, and both of them came home questioning if they were smart enough. You think this is just about one boy? This is about hundreds. He turned to Zion. You changed everything. Zion nodded, slowly. Backstage, as the board entered deliberation, Zion sat alone in the hallway. Dr. Bell joined him. You okay? He asked. Zion exhaled. No. But I'm better than I've ever been. Bell smiled. You know you didn't have to speak. I did, Zion replied. Not for her, for everyone still stuck in that room. They sat in silence, until the doors reopened. The board returned. Henry Lovell cleared his throat. We have reviewed the presented testimonies and evidence. Based on this hearing and the compiled documentation, he paused, looking toward the cameras, we find Miss Mallory Crane guilty of conduct unbecoming of an educator and complicit in sustained racial bias against her students. The room held its breath. And we vote unanimously to terminate her employment effective immediately. Gasps. Then applause. Then the live stream's comment section flooded. Justice. Zion won. About time. But just as Zion exhaled for the first time in weeks, a staffer rushed into the board's chamber, whispering into Lovell's ear. His face went pale. He tapped the mic again. We've just received a new complaint, one involving standardized test manipulation under Miss Crane's supervision. Multiple years. Dozens of students. The room erupted. The board voted. Unanimously. Ms. Crane's termination made headlines, but what came after it became history. Dalton Creek School District released a 32-page report acknowledging systemic bias within their schools. The findings included disproportionate disciplinary referrals for Black students, inequitable gifted program enrollment, and years of complaints swept under bureaucratic rugs. The superintendent resigned. 2 board members stepped down. A new role was created. Director of Equity and Inclusion, with direct oversight of teacher evaluations and student feedback mechanisms. Anonymous reporting systems were installed. The curriculum was reviewed for cultural bias. Teachers were mandated to attend anti-bias training, not just once, but quarterly, and Zion's name was etched into the foundation of it all. Not by his own request, but by necessity. Months later, Zion stood on a stage in Washington, D.C., dressed in a tailored black suit. The auditorium was filled with dignitaries, reporters, and other award recipients. Yet the focus was singular. President Chambers pinned the National Medal for Scientific Bravery and Integrity onto Zion's chest. In a time when doubt was louder than truth, she said, Zion Keaton held on to his science, his voice, and his dignity. And because of that, the world changed. The audience stood. Flashes went off. Zion shook the president's hand, but his eyes sought out his grandfather sitting in the front row, tearful and proud. Later during the press conference, a journalist asked, "Do you see yourself as exceptional?" Zion paused, then leaned into the mic. "No, I see myself as stubborn. That's all. I'm not special. I'm just the kid who didn't give up." That line became a rallying cry, printed on t-shirts, quoted in school posters, shared in teacher training slideshows. Just the kid who didn't give up. Back at Harvard, Zion returned to his studies with renewed focus. But fame didn't follow him around campus the way it once had. It trailed from a distance now, like a shadow cast by a past he had outgrown. He still attended lab sessions, still sent equations at 2 a.m., still pulled up research documents while riding the subway. But something in him had shifted. Not his mind, his mission. Because with everything that had happened, with everything he had endured and revealed, one fact refused to leave him. He shouldn't have had to fight that hard just to be heard. And if it happened to him, it was still happening to others. One rainy evening, Zion sat on the stoop of his dorm with Dr. Bell. They shared silence, broken only by the occasional splash of tires on wet pavement. Zion finally spoke. "I want to build something." Bell raised an eyebrow. "You've built plenty already." "Not here," Zion replied. "Back home. And not just home, places like it. Places where kids like me don't get labs, don't get invited, don't get heard." Bell listened closely. "I want to create science labs in underserved Black neighborhoods," Zion continued. "Places with real equipment, mentorship programs, open doors, no gatekeeping, where questions aren't mocked, but explored." Bell nodded slowly. "That's bold." Zion smirked. So was entropy feedback theory. They laughed quietly. Then Bell turned serious. "You'll need support, funding, structure." "I've already drafted a proposal," Zion said, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. Of course he had. Bell took it, looked it over, then smiled. "This is more than a lab." Zion looked out at the street. "It's a future." News broke the following week. Zion Keaton announces initiative to build free science labs in underserved communities. Social media exploded with support. Donors reached out. Educators volunteered. A nonprofit was formed within days. Echo Labs, named after Zion's original theory, where energy could return, under the right conditions. The mission was simple: to create the conditions where brilliance could return again and again, where it could rise freely. Zion's speech at the launch event was streamed nationwide. He stood on a modest stage, no flashing lights, no presidential escorts, just him, and a crowd of students in folding chairs, many of them young, many of them Black, all of them watching him not as a symbol but as Everything they said I wasn't, Zion told the audience. I already was, and so are you. He pointed to a prototype of the lab's mobile unit behind him. "This isn't just a building. This is your rebuttal. To every teacher who laughed, every system that ignored you, every test that said not yet." Then, smiling with purpose, he closed, "Let's make sure the next genius doesn't have to survive to be discovered." Zion announced his next project, building free science labs in underserved black neighborhoods. The walls of MIT's physics department hadn't changed in a century, still lined with dark oak, still echoing with chalk dust and Nobel ambitions. But one plaque on the fourth floor told a new story now. Beneath the title Tenured Faculty, in brushed steel lettering, was the name Dr. Zion Keaton, Entropic Systems and Applied Quantum Theory. At 28, he had become the youngest tenured professor in the institute's history. The same kid once accused of cheating on a middle school science quiz was now shaping global understanding of energy theory. Students from around the world fought for spots in his lectures. His office was modest. A single framed photo of his grandfather. Above the desk, books everywhere. A whiteboard covered in equations that didn't even exist in textbooks yet, because Zion was the one writing them. His textbook, Echo Logic, The Return Path of Energy, was used in over 3,000 US schools, not because it was easy, but because it was human. It broke down complexity without dumbing it down. It taught students to think in questions, not conclusions. But Zion's reach went far beyond the classroom. In the decade since launching Echo Labs, Zion had funded over 200 programs in underserved neighborhoods, mobile units, mentorship circles, microgrants for young inventors. One program, in Baltimore, helped a 12-year-old girl named Asha build an algae-powered generator. In Houston, a former dropout named Elijah used Zion's lab equipment to design a water filtration system that now served his entire apartment complex. Zion visited every city himself, not for press, but because he knew what it felt like to sit in a room where no one expected brilliance from you, where every question was a risk. He never wanted another kid to be alone in that. Years later, during a live interview with PBS, a journalist asked, "Do you remember the exact moment your story changed?" Zion smiled gently.
Yes, he said. When a teacher laughed.
The journalist paused. Laughed? Zion nodded. Not because I was wrong, but because she couldn't imagine I might be right. He adjusted the mic. That laugh built my fire. The clip went viral again. Not because it was new, but because it was timeless. The sound of doubt had become his origin story. When the feature film based on Zion's life was announced, he was hesitant. He didn't like being centered in narratives that only focused on trauma. But this is more than trauma, the director argued. It's resistance. It's rebirth. Zion only agreed under one condition. The film would spotlight not just him, but the kids still fighting, still dreaming, still being silenced. The movie premiered 3 years later. It was called Loop. Critics praised its restraint, its honesty, its refusal to turn Zion into a myth. In one particularly gutting scene, young Zion walks home from school, backpack slung low, passing boarded windows and cracked sidewalks, while audio clips of Miss Crane's laughter loop over the soundscape. When the movie ended, many theaters sat silent for minutes, and then the applause began. Miss Crane? Forgotten. No mention in textbooks, no legacy preserved. But in every interview, Zion never erased her completely. She was real, he said once, and her voice still echoes in other classrooms. That's why we don't stop. Echo Labs expanded globally. Chapters opened in Ghana, Jamaica, South Africa. Zion refused to build a brand. He built blueprints, meant to be shared, not owned. He mentored hundreds of black scientists, engineers, and thinkers. One year, a girl named Kyra won a global robotics prize using code she learned in an Echo Lab after-school program. When asked who inspired her, she replied, Zion Keaton. He's the reason I believe questions can be louder than fear. Zion never forgot Dayton. Every year on the anniversary of the science fair, he returned, not to visit Miss Crane's former classroom. It had been converted into a counseling room, but to speak with 7th graders. He told them about mistakes, about pressure, about silence, and about the moment he decided he wouldn't stay quiet just to be safe. One year he asked the students, "What would you do if someone told you your brilliance didn't belong here?" A boy in the back raised his hand. "Make them move." Zion smiled. Exactly. The final scene of Loop wasn't written until the night before filming. Zion called the director and asked, "Can we add something?" The next day, cameras rolled. Adult Zion, played by an actor with quiet gravity, walked through a dimly lit hallway, lined with yearbook photos. He paused at a photo of Miss Crane, young, smiling, arm folded, then turned toward the camera, broke the fourth wall, looked directly at the audience, and said, "Now, what if I stayed silent?" Fade to black. In the closing scene of the film, Zion turns to the camera and says, "Now, What if I stayed silent? If one boy's silence could have erased a future, imagine how many stories never got told. If this shook something in you, if you've ever been dismissed, doubted, or degraded for who you are, then don't scroll past this. Type yes if you believe every voice deserves to be heard. Subscribe if this broke your heart.